So our last talk for today is Jack Langworthy's talk. He is the Chief Executive Officer and founder of Ninayo, which is an online trading platform for agriculture in Tanzania. But today I believe we'll hear about his other endeavor, Maua Mazuri, which is a tissue culture lab based at the base of Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania. And they provide high quality seedlings for farmers of sort of all sizes in Africa. So Jack, all you. Also, we have a break scheduled after your talk, so feel free to go a little bit over since you're starting a bit behind.
That's kind of you, Will. You haven't even heard my talk yet. Hopefully at the end you want me to keep going. And great job pronouncing some Swahili words. I think you're a natural, and you, like most of the people on the call, I hope will take an interest and visit this part of the world. My talk is going to be in basically three parts. I want to introduce myself and the work we've done developing agriculture in East Africa, and sort of talk about how to practically do that as a college graduate, how to respectfully enter another part of the world and start bringing in new ideas and listening to the market to make things happen. And then we'll drill down a little bit more into the impact of the scientific research that brilliant minds on this call are doing. I know I did 3 years of lab science in undergrad, and during college, or if you're in these scientific endeavors, you don't always get to see the impact of your work in the real world. And that's so fun about what I get to do, is like I'm really close to economic empowerment for the world's most hardworking people. So I kind of want to connect that for people so that there's a light at the end of the tunnel and all the genome sequencing and other fun stuff that y'all get up to. And then I'm going to specifically talk about bananas versus plantains. I'm obsessed with bananas. So let's get into it. First slide. Okay. As Will mentioned, we're based at the foot of Mount Kilimanjaro. And excuse me. I came here initially as a Peace Corps volunteer after college to Tanzania. I'm not saying that everybody needs to do the Peace Corps if you want to integrate into an emerging market, but it is a great way. I got to live for 2.25 years, basically at the standard of living of the average Tanzanian, who makes like $1,000 per year and depends on what they can grow from their little 1/2 to 1 acre and then sell that on to the market for. I'm from Los Angeles. I'm not a farmer. It was a bit of a culture shock. This was back in 2009. And I remember getting here and thinking like, I hate it. I want to go home. Like, all my friends are at Coachella. This is not the place for me. But sometimes if you stick with things, you fall in love with the culture, you get a sense of the language and how things work, and new opportunities present themselves. And I'm saying that like 15 years later with a family here. So as a Peace Corps volunteer, I got to see up front what it's like for a smallholder farmer. I taught physics in a rural school that's that classic, 100 students, 20 desks, 3 notebooks, 2 pens, a lot of bright minds who didn't have much opportunity, and their parents would pull them out of school, particularly the girls, if they couldn't afford to keep them there. And almost entirely all of their income came from what they could produce from the ground and what they could sell it for. It's those two things. How bountiful is your crop and what's the market prices? I read that book 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel out there at Stanford, and it got me thinking about technology as a way to connect the markets. And that brought about Ninayo, which became the biggest online trading platform for East African agriculture. Got the co-founder of Uber, Garrett Camp, to invest in the company. We were in TechCrunch. It's been a big growth there, but it was also a bit of a trip going from like, I was no longer in a hut, but like rough, rural East African conditions to downtown San Francisco, sort of that classic startup life. And it was great. And I'd encourage all of you at Stanford to go befriend those kids in the Stanford GSB, because really there are so many applications for scientists such as yourselves who are able to really grasp and understand things, and then people who are able to fundraise around you and innovate technology and build those companies. So in 2020, I started with Maua Mazuri, which is a little more relevant for this talk. Excuse me, why is that button going this way? Shoot. Well, Maua Mazuri is a tissue culture laboratory located in Kilimanjaro. Real quickly, tissue culture is a non-GMO way to micropropagate healthy plant seedlings. This is so important in East Africa because there are a lot of diseases that plague the local planting materials. And just if you consider any commercial farm around the world, they're going to be using tissue culture seedlings because you need to know the genetic integrity of what you're planting. A smallholder farmer here doesn't necessarily get to trust in the banana suckers that they're planting, and then they can't invest in the things like the fertilizer and the labor as confidently because you don't have knowledge that the genetics are good. So Maua Mazuri, we are, is this sticking? We primarily serve these large scale farms in East Africa. And when I say large scale, it's large scale for East Africa. It's like 50 acres to 100 acres. This is nothing like a Chiquita banana in Honduras or one of those emerging markets, but it is also good to start seeing farms grow. Not everybody should be a smallholder farmer, though I do think there's huge advantages to the decentralized production of seedlings and food throughout East Africa. In the long run, that might be more advantageous for people to be living closer to nature as opposed to the more suburban life in developed markets. So what's great about the work we're doing, and I didn't found Maua Mazuri, it was a team of shareholders who really invested in top-notch equipment from Holland to set up a laboratory that is at world-class standards to serve this emerging market. And as it is important to supply those bigger farmers, but we also want to come up with products that can help empower smallholder farmers. And what we've developed is something that is called the banana business in a box. And this serves a few different functions, but first off, a smallholder farmer, I'll get to how important bananas are, but they're not doing bananas because they're yummy. They're doing bananas because it's going to send their kids to school. It's going to help them put a new roof, pay their bills. It's an investment. And even though I think a lot of the world regards the smallholder farmer as less literate, I mean, they are less literate, but they know numbers and they know business. And if you can speak to them about setup costs, about revenues, and show them those models, it clicks. That's what they're interested in. Nobody wants to be a subsistence farmer stuck in that cycle of poverty. So we speak to them clearly about what the investment model is. We then provide them the tissue culture seedlings themselves, as well as access to any other inputs that they might need. WhatsApp is by far the biggest communication out here, and we have our agronomists in there giving 24/7 advice. So for instance, if a farmer sees their leaves are turning yellow on the plant, we can identify that as sigatoka, tell them to cut it off. There's also a crowdsourcing effect, which is really cool to see. You know, WhatsApp groups can get very off topic and it can be hilarious and inappropriate, but by and large, it's useful for people to be talking about the markets, about things that are going to impact those livelihoods and bring them all together. Finally, we are able to set up off-taker agreements. That means you're kind of guaranteed to sell your big bunch of bananas for $4 a pop. You can confidently plan your financing around there. One element that is missing that we've been working to bring on, and hopefully actually at the end of the month will be there, is a financing component. Even though our seedlings have such high yields, it is an expensive upfront cost. Tissue culture seedlings cost about $1 a piece. That's what we sell them for. Whereas the local planting material is more like 30 cents. But over the course of 2.5 years, 3 harvests, you're looking at totally different numbers. So I want to sort of show you, as mentioned, the average income in Tanzania is about $1,000 per year. But if you're able to set up a half-acre plot, 500 seedlings, 2x2 spacing, and this isn't even intercropping beans or some of those other good practices, but just looking at the bananas and at a modest sales price per bunch, farmers are able to profit about $2,000, $7,000 over the course of 30 months. Divided by 3, that's about $2,000, $2,500 per year. That's more than like 2.5 times the average income on just a half an acre. And so the benefit of this tissue culture technology is more kids going to school. It is, more food reaching markets at better prices, fighting malnutrition. From a sustainability point of view, these seedlings require less fertilizers, less pesticides. It's a real game changer for East Africa when we're able to take this tissue culture knowledge and get it out here. The ROI on the seedlings comes from the fact, like right there, you can see the yield per acre. We're at about 35 tons per acre. Tanzania local farming, it's about 7. The drivers for that low production are diseases. It's also that people can't invest in the fertilizer because they aren't confident in those seedlings. And a kind of mind-blowing fact that's worth considering, despite this production right here of say 7 to 8 tons per acre, Tanzania is still a top 10 producer of bananas worldwide. So Costa Rica, Ecuador, these countries have $3 billion export markets. All of Cavendish banana, those are the bananas at Trader Joe's and Co-op in Europe. The bananas that the Western world has known as Cavendish, they're delicious. We call them Kimalindi here. But we're producing as much as those countries that are, pejoratively called banana republics because of the United Fruit takeovers in the 50s. But we're doing that same production despite our low yield per acre. And that gets to the cultural element of bananas in East Africa. I think of it a lot like the way potatoes are to the Irish. It's something of a cultural totem. I'll dig a little bit more into that shortly, but you can just see that with this low production, we're still producing as much as those giant corporations doing monolithic plantations of all one variety. So that despite the fact that we're growing many varieties. So there's a picture of the Cavendish. I mean, a quick history of it. It became big business in the 20s through the 50s with a variety called Gros Michel, which is no longer used. It's the Cavendish that we eat today, but your grandparents in America and Europe would have been eating Gros Michel. Part of the reason it's so popular around the world, it's a nice yellow color. It's got thicker skin, so it doesn't bruise as easily. And it's a freaking great snack. It comes in a wrapper that's organic. It's wonderful. But there are a lot more opportunities in the banana space than just the Cavendish. And I'm sure if any of you guys have been into an emerging market, you know how many varieties of plantain there are. In East Africa, our lab makes a special effort to focus on the East African highland plantain varieties. My Kenyan colleagues might know them as like Mzuzu, Kisukari, and Chikara. I honestly don't know the scientific names. I'm not even sure that anybody does yet. Feel free to tell me on the panel. But it very much feels like the Wild West in terms of scientific research. We'll go with Meta and other organizations to banana conferences. And people from Uganda and Kenya and Tanzania cannot decide on what the same name for these varieties are, but there's a deep love and for them. Some have a very high sugar content. My favorite ones here, the Kisukari, are so sweet, and they could be a big hit throughout the world, but they have a thinner shell, which makes them bruise more easily. Whereas things like the plantains, they have a tremendous amount of nutrients. Let me see what this next slide is. Yeah, my wife is Tanzanian, and when she gave birth to both of our children, as is the local custom, she was nourished back to her strength with a plantain soup called mtori. So what you'll find in East Africa, specifically with bananas, is there's this huge push for us to start producing Cavendish. And we could be supplying the Middle East. We could become, you know, right now we have a $300,000 export market for Cavendish. It could easily be 3 billion, 10,000x bigger by supplying Eastern Europe and the Middle East. However, I'd say that's kind of less interesting. It's very interesting to me as a banana seedling salesman, like go for it. I want that big plantation. But where the real opportunity to do something exciting is embracing these overlooked varieties of Kisukari and Zuzu that are delicious. And I do believe there's a palette for them around the globe. In every, you know, I know in India, Central America, parts of Asia, people don't just do the Cavendish. But of course, because there's been Chiquita, Dole, billions of dollars invested into the Cavendish, you will have that correspond to the research and the knowledge of that particular fruit. So with that, I will wrap up, and I do want to say, follow me on LinkedIn. I'm very keen to connect young scientists to our laboratory, to any questions you might have about how you can be involved in making an impact in East Africa. I know it's hard to make the hurdle from California to East Africa, but Karibu Sana, you're most welcome. And thanks, I'll end it there.
Thank you so much, Jack. That was a really cool perspective, especially at the end of a few science talks, to hear a perspective outside of science. And to your point, I actually had a pink banana once last year, and it just tasted so different, and it's so much better than kind of the average Cavendish I can find at Safeway.
Right on.